शास्त्री मैडम। ये तो
I request all of you to put your mobiles in silence mode. A very good morning to all. On behalf of the Postgraduate School IARI, faculty and students, I welcome you all to the fourth day of the week-long celebrations of 54th Convocation Program. As part of the Convocation Program of Postgraduate School IARI, every year we have the prestigious LAL BAHADUR SHASTRI Memorial Lecture. Today's lecture is the 46th in this series. The LAL BAHADUR SHASTRI Memorial Lecture was instituted by the Indian Agricultural Research Institute to pay homage to one of the most illustrious sons of India, the late Sri LAL BAHADUR Shastri Ji, former Prime Minister of India. During his Prime Ministership, Shastri Ji realized the importance of agriculture in transforming the lives of the country's poor people. His famous slogan, Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, reminds us of his vision about agriculture and its role in mitigating poverty and bringing overall prosperity to this nation. I take privilege in inviting the chairman of the function, Padma Bhushan Dr. R.S. Parodaji, Chairman Trust for Advancement of Agriculture Sciences, to kindly grace the dais. I also feel privileged in inviting the eminent speaker of today's program, Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, Secretary, Department of Health Research and Director General, Indian Council of Medical Research, to kindly grace the dais. I also invite Dr. Trilochan Mahapatra, Director IARI, and Dr. R.K. Jain, Dean and Joint Director Education, to kindly join the dignitaries on the dais. Thank you, sirs. Dignitaries on the dais, invited guests from the Council, DG, BISA, various ICR institutes, project directors, heads of divisions, scientists, students, ladies and gentlemen, good morning once again. On behalf of the Director, Dean, faculty and students of Indian Agricultural Research Institute, I welcome you all to the prestigious 46th LAL BAHADUR Shastri Memorial Lecture on a very important and relevant topic, challenges of health and nutrition for India and possible solutions. Before we start the program, I call upon the postgraduate students choir to render Saraswati Vandana.
जय जय हे भगवती सुर भारती तव चरणों प्रणमाम्यहम्। जय जय हे भगवती सुर भारती तव चरणों प्रणमाम्यहम्। नाद ब्रह्ममयी जय वागेश्वरी, नाद ब्रह्ममयी जय वागेश्वरी, शरणं ते गच्छाम्यहम्। जय जय हे भगवती सुर भारती तव चरणों प्रणमाम्यहम्। त्वमसि शरण्या त्रिभुवन धन्या, त्वमसि शरण्या त्रिभुवन धन्या, सुरमुनि वन्दित चरणा, नवरस मधुरा कविता मुखरा, नवरस मधुरा कविता मुखरा, स्मित रुचि रुचिरा भरणा। जय जय हे भगवती सुर भारती तव चरणों प्रणमाम्यहम्। आसीना भव मानस हंसे,
As a mark of respect to late Dr. Lal Bahadur Shastri ji, I request the dignitaries to kindly light the lamp and pay floral tributes. Thank you, sir. I now request our director, Dr. Mahapatra ji, to kindly welcome the chairman of the function. Thank you, sirs. I now request our director, Dr. Mahapatra ji, to kindly welcome the chairman of the function, Dr. Parada ji, with a bouquet of flowers. I once again request our director to welcome Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, eminent speaker of today's program, with a bouquet of flowers. I request our director, sir, to welcome Madam Neera Shastri ji with flowers. I also request our director to welcome Shri Anil Shastri ji with flowers. Sunil Shastri ji with flowers. Sorry, sir, for that. Thank you, sir. I request Dr. R.K. Jain, Dean and Joint Director Education, to welcome our director with flowers. I now invite our beloved director, Dr. Mahapatra ji, to formally welcome and apprise the audience of the significance of 46th LAL BAHADUR SHASTRI Memorial Lecture and also introduce the chairman to this august house.
Thank you. A very good morning to everyone present here this morning. It's my proud privilege as the director of this institute to extend a very hearty welcome to each one of you on this auspicious occasion of the Lal Bahadur Shastri Memorial Lecture, the 46th one, which is going to be delivered by Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, Secretary, Department of Health Research, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, and Director General of the Indian Council of Medical Research, New Delhi. The chairperson of this function, Padma Vibhushan Dr. R.S. Paroda, members of the family of late Sri LAL Bahadur Shastri ji, Sri Sunil Shastri ji, Madam Neera Shastri ji, many distinguished personalities in the audience, Professor V.L. Chopra, Dr. H.S. Gupta, Dr. S.K. Datta, Dr. Anupam Verma, in fact, many others, our own institute, joint directors, ex-directors, ex-joint directors, directors of the sister institutions, many of the retired colleagues, scientists, distinguished scientists from the institute, my own colleagues from the institute, professors and heads, students, press and media, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. This is a very prestigious lecture. It's actually a lecture series. In fact, initiated in the year 1968 as a mark of our respect to one of the most illustrious and exemplary sons of the country, the second Prime Minister, the late Sri LAL Bahadur Shastri ji. In fact, you all know that Sri Shastri ji symbolizes the very simplicity of Indian life in the vast milieu, the cultural milieu, and the triumph of sovereign nation striving to meet the aspirations of its people. He is the epitome of our national pride. So it's most befitting that the person who coined this slogan, Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, in his memory, the lecture was instituted at the Indian Agriculture Research Institute. And we are fortunate, all of us, that in some form or other we are associated. And by virtue of being present here, we consider ourselves fortunate to be part of this program. Guarding the frontiers and also ensuring food security, both are equally important. And thereby, the significance of the slogan that he coined, Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, honor the soldier, honor the farmer. And this prestigious lecture has been delivered in the past by many distinguished speakers. In fact, the first one to be delivered by Dr. Bikram Sarawai on the topic, How Green is Our Revolution? That was way back in the year 1968. And many eminent speakers, including Professor M.S. Swaminathan himself, Dr. G.V.K. Rao, Professor C.H. Hanumanta Rao, and many others, distinguished scientists, have delivered this lecture in the past. In fact, these lectures delivered earlier are a veritable mine of wisdom and information emanating from the best brains of the country. And in fact, as members of this family, we take pride in, first of all, having a personality like late Lal Bahadur Shastri ji to govern this country, and also think about the farmers and farming community of this country, and eulogizing the contribution of farmers for food and nutritional security of this country. So friends, this is how this lecture has been organized in the past, and today we are here. And this lecture is being chaired today by Dr. R.S. Paroda. Dr. Paroda is very well known to this fraternity. All of us know him very well for his contribution, for his personality, and for all that he has done for the agricultural development in this country. I'll not read his biodata, it is too long, in fact. Sir, we are fortunate and extremely grateful that you agreed to our request. And this morning, in fact, when he started, he's so particular. He says, I'm starting, I may be late, so I'll go and reach directly the auditorium. So every specific moments that he reminds that this is what is to be done. And we are grateful, sir, you agreed and you were there before time. Dr. Paroda doesn't need an introduction to this gathering, but for my colleagues, younger colleagues, who must know very briefly that Dr. Paroda did his BSc Agriculture and also from the University of Rajasthan and MSc Agriculture in the year 1964 from University of Udaipur. As an alumnus of this particular institution, he completed his PhD in the year 1968, in the same year in which the first Lal Bahadur Shastri Memorial Lecture was delivered by Dr. Sarawai. After completion of his PhD, he went to UK for his postdoctoral fellowship for 2 years at the University of Wales. And after completion, he came back to India and joined Haryana Agriculture University. And as a forest breeder, in fact, contributed very significantly and bred, and it's difficult to breed, and bred more than 12 varieties, some of them still rule today. And that is the initial years of his very significant contribution to varietal development. And in fact, subsequent to that, he worked as a head at the Arid Zone Research Institute and subsequently Director of Research at the Haryana Agriculture University, and then moved on to the National Bureau of Plant Genetic Resources in the year 1985. And he was just 43 years old by that time. And as a dynamic director of the National Bureau of Plant Genetic Resources, you all know that what all he did, in fact, he rebuilt the institution and brought in the gene bank for which we take pride. And the nation, in fact, takes pride. And having preserved so many lakhs of germplasm, which would have been otherwise lost. So that's the kind of elaborate gene bank he established. So he's known as an institution builder. And after that, he moved on to the council as the Deputy Director General, you all know, and continued there for almost more than 5 years. And in fact, during his Deputy Director Generalship, initiated many different programs. And all of you know that the program on hybrids, in fact, the networks that he built, very strategically and systematically, that brought in many different hybrids, in fact, hybrids in many different crops, across crop species. So that's a very important contribution that for which he will be always remembered. In fact, he is always remembered for that. And after that, he moved for a short while on a FAO program. He was at Bangkok, and he was there. And then again, he moved back to India as the Secretary, Department of Agriculture Research and Education, and Director General of the Indian Council of Agriculture Research. Again, during this period, there are many different activities which were initiated during his period. And you all know that the National Agricultural Science Center, who is so tall and reminds us every day that the systematic planning and the pains that Dr. Paroda took And while entering that center, everyone is reminded of Dr. Prodha's contribution, sir. We are grateful for that, and many other activities. And my own association, through the genomics program, rice genome sequencing program. In fact, if we are in this country in genomics map today, that credit goes to Professor Prodha for being at the forefront of initiating genomics program in the country and persuading Dr. Manju Sharma to help this program in terms of funding, joint funding rather, and then bringing this up, supporting this up so that it become a very successful program as an example of genomics program and the rice genome sequencing program particularly to start with, and which branched out subsequently to many different genomics programs. So sir, we are grateful to you for all this that you did during that period, and he has been recognized by a number of awards and honors. In fact, he served as chairman of the Global Forum on Agriculture Research from 1998 to 2002, chairman and vice chairman of the ICRISAT, board of trustees and member of board of trustees of IARI. It is a kind of very remarkable one, and executive secretary of the Asia Pacific Association of Agriculture Research Institutions, that is APARI, for a very long time, since 1993 till recently. He relinquished this post, and also he established this trust for advancement of agricultural sciences, you all know, since 2002, and of which he is currently the chairman. He is awarded with the Rafi Ahmad Kidwai Memorial Award of the ICAR, ICAR Research Team Award, FICCI Award, Om Prakash Vasina Award, and many different awards. In fact, Dr. B.P. Pal Memorial Award of the NAS and Dr. Borlog Award. Many others, this is to name a few, is the fellow of the National Academy of Agricultural Sciences, Indian National Academy, Indian National Science Academy, and also Indian Academy of Science, Bangalore, Russian Academy of Agricultural Sciences, and also Academy of Sciences for the Developing World. And there are many others. I'm not really going to read everything. And in fact, he is honorary DSc from several universities of the country. He was General President of the Indian Science Congress Association. In fact, the Science Congress was held in this campus, and that was a tremendous success. And the credit goes to you, sir. And there are many others, kind of significant contributions of Dr. Prodha. I'm not going to read all of that, but we are so grateful that you are here. You are guiding the national agriculture research even today, and many ways the international agriculture research, which is very, very significant in the Central Asia, in Southeast Asia, in South Asia, and the whole world is so grateful, sir. And we are thankful to you for accepting our invitation to grace this occasion and chair this particular program. And with these words, I welcome all of you once again to this memorial lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. In all humility, I request the chairman of today's function, Padma Bhushan Dr. R.S. Parodaji, Chairman Trust for Advancement of Agriculture Sciences, to introduce the eminent speaker of today's function.
Honorable Anil Shastri ji, Mrs. Neera Shastri ji, Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, Dr. Mahapatra, Dr. Jain, Professor Chopra, Professor Anupam Verma, Dr. Brahm Singh, Dr. Anand Singh, Dr. Sapan Datta, Dr. Ramaswamy, Dr. Gupta, many distinguished faculty members of this prestigious institute known as PUSA Institute popularly, dear students, ladies and gentlemen. We have come here to actually listen to our key speaker, Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, and I have been given the responsibility to convey to you her brief biodata. First of all, I must thank you, Dr. Mahapatra, for a very generous introduction. I thought you said it is long, so you would not read it, but you read it. So I'm really grateful, but it makes me humble. First, and also I would like to uh, have my tribute to our great leader, Sri LAL Bahadur Shastri ji, who recognized the importance of farmers. We say भारत कृषक प्रधान देश है, भारत कृषि प्रधान देश है, पर हमने कृषक को प्रधान नहीं बनाया, और शायद पहली बार इम्पोर्टेंस एक कृषक को दी तो लाल बहादुर शास्त्री जी ने दी. So we are indeed grateful to him. It's really nice of IARI and ICR to organize this kind of lecture series, which we consider one of the most important events during the convocation week of IARI. And we are happy that this time we have amongst us Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, the Secretary Department of Health Research, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, and also the Director General, Indian Council of Medical Research. First of all, I had been knowing Soumya since we were a student of Dr. Swaminathan, and we knew that they were also grown and they grew on this campus, and we were also a student on this campus. And your association with this PUSA Institute, therefore, is very important, and to have you as Director General of Indian Council of Medical Research is not only a matter of pride to you, but to all of us as well. And especially to be first women Director General, I suppose. So that's another important. Soumya was born in 1959, and she has taken over as Director General on 17th August 2015. She brings with her vast experience in health research and research administration. Prior to this assignment, she was Director, National Institute for Research in Tuberculosis in Chennai since 2012. After completing her MBBS from AFMC Pune, again important college, and MD in Pediatrics from AIMS New Delhi, further training included a fellowship in nanotechnology and pediatric pulmonology at the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles, University of Southern California, and a research fellowship in the Department of Pediatrics Respiratory Diseases, University of Leicester, UK. So she had been trained in US as well as UK. She joined the Tuberculosis Research Center, Chennai in 1990, the President's Gold Medal at the undergraduate level for the best all-round outgoing student of the year 1980. She was awarded ICMR Shanika Oration Award by ICMR in 2008, Tamil Nadu Science and Technology Award in 2012, and is fellow of 3 of the India's science academies. Through Department of Health Research and the network of ICMR institutes, Dr. Swaminathan looks forward to focusing on key health priorities and generating scientific evidence for achieving public health impact. Further, she will work towards expanding the scope and the quality of biomedical research being conducted in our medical colleges. So, you would agree that she has real good experience of various fields in medical science, and perhaps we are fortunate to have her as the speaker to deliver Lal Bahadur Shastri lecture. So I would now invite her, rather than standing in between her and you.
Respected Dr. Paroda, Dr. Mahapatra, Dr. R.K. Jain, respected family members of Shri Lal Bahadur Shastri ji, and very senior respected scientists from IARI, from ICMR, and from many other institutes, and dear friends and students. First of all, let me say that it's a great honor and privilege to be here, and it's also very emotional for me to come and speak in this auditorium. As Dr. Paroda mentioned, I grew up in IARI, and so it brings back very good memories. And thank you so much for inviting me. I feel humbled, especially looking at the great people who have given this oration in the past. For the talk today, I have selected this topic on health and nutritional challenges because it's something of common interest to agricultural scientists as well as to medical scientists and health researchers. And I feel that only if we work together can we make a difference in the situation which is prevailing in India today. And over the next half an hour or so, I will try to cover, it's a very huge topic, it's a very vast area, but I would like to share some of the data from ICMR and from other institutions to highlight the challenges and then look at potential solutions. First of all, I would also offer my humblest tribute like Gandhi ji, he identified himself with the farmers, with the kisans, with the poorest of the poor. And despite being Prime Minister of this country, look at the humility of this person. I think we need to learn a lot from people like Lal Bahadur Shastri ji, who coined the term Jai Kisan, Jai Jawan. And of course, now we also have Jai Vigyan, which is a very important third element to the slogan. So the South Asian enigma, so to say, is that we've had a very high growth rate in the country. If you look at GDP in India, it's been growing 7%, 6.5% to 8% every year. We have so many national programs which are targeted for food and nutrition security, and yet we have such high rates of undernutrition and malnutrition. And what is the reason for that? See, nutritional status is not dependent only on the food that you eat, but on many other factors in the environment. So if you look at right from agroclimatic factors and the food production, the type of land, soil health is a very important thing. As you know, if the soil health is poor, then the micronutrient content of the cereal or the pulse is going to be poor. The use of fertilizers, pesticides. Then demographic factors, what is the family size of the people, whether they're urbanized or not. Then of course you have many socio-economic factors, and then we have disasters which can affect the livelihood of people. All of these factors together contribute to household food security. And of course we also have the developmental programs now like MNREGA and availability of PDS, and whether the family has access to these programs. Now together all these contribute to household food security, and this in turn affects the food intake of the individuals. And that again is affected by many socio-cultural factors. Within the household, who gets more share of food? Is it the man of the house? Is it the woman? Is it the young child? Or is it the adolescent boy? I think all of us know that in the Indian patriarchal society, still very much the preference is given to the men and the boys of the household. The demand and the physiological factors for food also depend on the status. If you're a young child, less than 3 years of age, you need much more in terms of calories and protein per kilogram body weight than you need as an adult. Similarly, when a woman is pregnant or breastfeeding, she actually needs more calories and protein and micronutrients than at other times. So all these together determine the intake, and that determines is one determinant of nutrition, but there are many other determinants, especially the environmental factors, water and sanitation. It has been shown now clearly that absence of sanitation or open defecation is clearly linked to stunting and undernutrition in children. Similarly, safe drinking water. If you do not have safe drinking water, repeated attacks of gastrointestinal infections, presence of worms, diarrhea. If the child and family lives in a malaria-prone region, repeated infections can all contribute to a poor nutrition status. So we see that it's a very complex thing, and just by giving somebody more calories or more protein, we're not going to improve the nutrition of the individual, and that's maybe one reason why all our supplementation programs have not had the desired impact. If you look at the nutritional status of under 3 children, you know that we have repeated surveys in our country. The National Family Health Survey, we've had 3 complete rounds, and the 4th one is ongoing now, the NFHS 4, after a gap of 10 years. The previous ones were after a gap of 5 years each. And then we have the rapid survey of children, which was conducted by UNICEF and Department of Women and Child Development, and now the NFHS is going on. We can see that, yes, there is a gradual reduction in underweight. This is stunting, starting at more than 50% in 1990s, and now it has come below 40%. But still, it's a very high rate of stunting. Stunting means low height for age, and it happens in the first few years of life. And if you cannot catch up the height during the first 2 to 3 years, however much you feed the child later, it is never going to grow to the potential height. So stunting is a marker of nutritional deficiency during the antenatal period, pregnancy, and the early life after birth. The red line is underweight, that is low weight for age. That has come down a little more faster. And this one is wasting, which is low weight for height. That shows an acute shortage of food or acute malnutrition. That has also come down from about 25% down to about 15%. Now, one of the very important determinants of the health of the child as well as the family is the mother, the woman of the household. And this graph shows the age, the percentage of women who were married before the age of 18. And you know that there's a law in India that girls cannot marry before the age of 18. But if you see data, this is from 2014, you see that almost 50% of girls in Arunachal Pradesh, this is Rajasthan, Bihar, West Bengal, Jharkhand and so on, coming down to Kerala and Mizoram, Nagaland on this side. There are very few women married before 18, but look at the states here, we still have 30, 40, 50% of girls being married before 18. That means they will also have children early, and this means that they have not completed schooling. So it's all linked to female literacy, and we know now that female literacy and education is directly linked to the health of children. Again, as I mentioned, stunting in children, that is a low height for age, correlates with levels of open defecation in communities. And if you look at the percentage of people, again, this is from the rapid survey of children 2014. So this is fairly recent data. We see Odisha, Jharkhand, Bihar, more than 75% of people in these states are still practicing open defecation. That means they have no access to toilets. And again, you see Kerala at this end here, where a very tiny proportion of people are left without sanitation. The All India average is still around 50%. So again, this is another enigma, we talk about 80% of our population or more now having a mobile phone, but 50% of our people still don't have access to a toilet, especially a toilet in the household. So this is something to be seriously worried about. And now with the Swachh Bharat campaign, I think there is a lot of attention being paid to this. So at least we are talking about it openly, we are discussing it, and we are thinking of how to improve the situation. We all know that states differ in poverty levels. And again, if you see at the bottom here will be Goa, Kerala, Sikkim, and on top here are all the EAG states, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh, Bihar, UP, and so on. And in those poorest states, about 40% of people are living in poverty. The All India average is about 20 to 22%. Now, if you look at data across the world on infant mortality rate is babies dying before the age of 1 year. This correlates very well with the overall health and development status of a particular community. And if you look at the world rates, this is in blue here, and then Asia is in green, we can see that from the 1950s, the sharp decline in the infant mortality rates all over the world, and Asia also has declined. Africa continues to remain the highest. If you look at India now, the latest figures are 29 per 1,000 live births is what we have. And again, within India, we see huge differences with Kerala. I think it is now 9 per 1,000, and Tamil Nadu is also close the next second, which is still in double digits. And on the other hand, we still have states where there is 50, 60 per 1,000 live births being born, and these are some of the other Asian countries. Bangladesh has made a lot of progress in the last few years, and this is the infant mortality rate by state. And you may not be able to read all these numbers, but again, essentially it shows the variability. Here is Goa at 10, and then we have many states. Assam is probably the worst here with 55. So we have differences from state to state, but we also have differences from district to district within states. Now, when do these babies die? As the immunization coverage has improved, the healthcare has improved, what has happened is that less children are dying of pneumonia and of diarrhea. Earlier, the top causes of death used to be diarrhea and pneumonia. But with availability of oral rehydration salts, with availability of antibiotics, with the village health nurses, the community health workers, the ASHAs, they have been able to control to a large extent the diarrhea and respiratory deaths, though they still exist. So now the deaths are all shifting to the neonatal period, which is the first 1 month after birth. So more than 50% of the under 1 year age death is happening during the first 28 days, and most of them are happening, you can see, by the third day. About 50% of babies who die are dying within the third day, and this is a natural thing. It happens. You start reducing the deaths due to the easy things, and then you start getting more and more difficult challenges to handle. So the neonatal deaths happen because the baby is born small for date, it's low birth weight, it develops hypothermia, which is low temperature, or it develops infection if it is not properly handled after birth, or the mother is very weak, cannot feed the baby. These are the main causes of early neonatal death. So to prevent this, you need to have a very good care around the time of delivery. If you look at maternal mortality rate compared to Brazil, India, Nepal, Pakistan are still very high, and we have not been able to achieve the Millennium Development Goals either for maternal or for infant mortality. So we have missed the mark for both of them, again because of certain states lagging behind. If you look at the causes of maternal mortality, we can see that the major cause here is hemorrhage. Women who deliver either at home or in a small primary health center and cannot be reached to a bigger place, and they are dying of hemorrhage, they cannot be given blood transfusion. The second important cause is sepsis, that is infections, and then obstructed labor and other reasons. So this is from the Registrar General of India, the data on maternal mortality rate. We had come to about 140 in 2015, but we were supposed to reach 109 according to the Millennium Development Goals. This is an analysis of data from different countries, which shows that the higher the proportion of deliveries that are attended by a skilled attendant. So when you have 100% attendance of deliveries by a skilled attendant, you have a very low rate of maternal deaths. And as you go to countries where the women are delivering within their homes, assisted either by a DAI or by nobody, then you find that it is correlated. So that is why India instituted this under the NRHM program, that all women should go for institutional deliveries to the nearest primary health center or community health center, and there's a cash incentive being given under the Janani Suraksha Yojana. A woman who goes and delivers will be given 6,000 rupees, and this now amount is even going to be increased further. So because of this, in the last few years, there's been a huge increase now in institutional deliveries, and in states like Tamil Nadu, it's close to 100% institutional deliveries. But still in many of the central Indian states, it is around 70 to 80%. So this is one factor by which we can reduce the maternal death making sure that they are attended by a skilled attendant. Low birth weight, another very big problem. We still have 1/3 of our babies being born low birth weight. Low birth weight is less than 2.5 kgs at birth. If you look at other countries, here is Bhutan, here is Indonesia, this is Korea, very low. If you look at the US, Europe, it's about 10% or less. And this has remained at 30% now for the last 30, 40 years. And this is a big cause for worry because a baby born small will continue to be small, and this results in a intergenerational impact. A small baby will result in a small adult, that small adult will have a small baby, and so on. If you look at communities or countries which have good nutrition, or even if you look at Indians who have migrated to the West and look at the subsequent generations, you'll find every generation is taller than the parents. Children who are born Indian origin will be taller. Now, why is it that in India that is not happening? We're not seeing the secular trend in the majority of people. You may be seeing it only in the upper class, upper middle class people. Here is a trend in infant mortality rate from the 4 National Family Health Surveys. Yes, there has been a decline, but you can see that rural infant mortality is higher than urban, and the pooled infant mortality rate is now 29 for the country. So, to improve the maternal and newborn status further, both in terms of death, reducing death, and in terms of increasing the birth weight of the child, first thing is to delay pregnancy. Girls should not get married or pregnant before the age of 18. In fact, the full development is not yet complete. So, ideally, beyond the age of 20 is when the pregnancy should occur. So, and these girls, if they are in school and if they have an opportunity for education, there's every chance that they will not want to go in for marriage and childbearing very, very early. I had visited some tribal areas, and in fact I was discussing with the Secretary Tribal Affairs, and he was saying, why are all these tribal children keep dropping out of school? And by the age of 14, 15, the girls are pregnant. So one of the reasons is that they are sent to tribal schools to study, and they have only up to class 10, and after that there is no opportunity for them. And if you go to these tribal areas, you have very bright children there, boys and girls, but no further opportunity. It's difficult for them to go to college. They cannot compete and get into colleges and universities. So they have nothing to do, no livelihood. And therefore, it's but natural that the boys take to alcohol, and they also elope, and the girls get pregnant. If you give them an opportunity, like in some communities, paramedical courses, nursing courses, some teacher training courses, the girls are extremely happy to have a profession and a vocation. So I think it's a question of giving opportunities to girls and educating people to make sure they don't. That's the first one. The second is, like I said, improving the quality of care. You can bring a woman to a primary health center and insist that she delivers there, but the state of some of our health centers is pathetic. There are no facilities, there's no drinking water, there are dogs roaming around inside, very poor sanitation. So probably she's better off at home. So if we want to improve, we have to look at quality now, not at quantity. There's no point increasing the number of buildings that we're building, whether it's schools or it's primary health centers. We have to provide quality care. We have to make sure that babies are fed, given breast milk immediately. That's the most important thing that protects them. And again, this is a question of changing community perceptions, behaviors, and stigma. People have a misconception about giving colostrum, and in many communities, at least still 64% in our country, we need to increase that. Now with Mission Indradhanush, launched by Ministry of Health, this is improving, and that will help in reducing the neonatal mortality. Now I want to move on to some statistics on nutrition from our National Nutrition Monitoring Bureau. Many of you would have heard of this. It was been running for the last 40 years out of the National Institute of Nutrition in Hyderabad. It's one of our oldest institutes, ICMR institutes, and they have been working in 10 states collecting diet and nutritional status using standardized uniform methodologies in rural, urban and tribal areas. So it's one of those surveys which has got a wealth of information, and it also helps to evaluate the national nutrition programs and to recommend mid-course corrections. So what does the NNMB data show in terms of nutritional or dietary deficiencies? The first thing is, if we look at the food intake as a percentage of the recommended daily allowance among children, of course they have put it by gender, boys and girls, but there's not much difference between boys and girls in food intake in young children. The first thing we notice is that there's a diet is deficient in the green leafy vegetables, only 15% of the recommended daily allowance, and also only 40% of pulses and legumes. Cereals and millets also about 75%. And if you look at this roots and tubers, the children are taking more than double what they should be taking per day. Again, milk, fats, sugar, all much less than the daily allowance. If we look at in terms of nutrients, protein seems to be adequate. The energy is still deficient. So energy, they're getting only 2/3 of what they should get. But if you look at things like calcium, iron, vitamin A, and all these micronutrient vitamins, riboflavin, niacin, vitamin C, folic acid, extremely low intake. And if you look at it another way, you find that the majority of children are getting less than 50% of the, I think adults also, this data is for children, but it is true for adults also, that when you look at micronutrients, then majority of Indians in the diet are not getting enough of either vitamin A or vitamin B complex or vitamin C or iron or folic acid. And NNMB has data over 40 years. So when we look from the mid-1970s to the latest round in 2012, we see that intake of cereals and millets has come down, and what has gone up are the milk and milk products to some extent, and the protein, the legumes are not changing. The pulses remain around 4 to 5%. What about consumption of millets? Most of our rural and tribal people get it in the supermarkets, and all of us go and buy millets and we try to consume. But the traditional diet of rural and urban people is now changing. And again, in tribal areas, it's particularly striking that when you go there and you see what they're eating, most of them are now totally switched over to what is available through the PDS, which is generally a white rice. Or if it is in the north, it may be wheat. But majority of tribal populations in our country are rice eating, and therefore they've given up their millets, their traditional, what they used to collect from the forest, they used to do hunting, gathering, all that is stopped now, and they're just living on. So their complete change in their diet as well as in their lifestyle has had a huge impact on the health, a very negative impact. Again, if you look at underweight, stenting and wasting, you can see this is a tribal, this is a rural, and this is urban. So in all the nutrition parameters in children, the tribal children are the worst, followed by rural, followed by urban. And this is a time trend. Again, we can see that over a period from 1988 to 2012, there is a decline. It is a very small decline. It's not how much you expect to see in 40 years. And again, the same variability by states. If you look at Goa, Pondicherry, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, you have lower rates, and you come to the same old Madhya Pradesh, Bihar, Chhattisgarh and Meghalaya, you find high rates. Same thing with wasting. And if you look at it, this is the latest data from the annual health survey done by the Registrar General. We can see very clearly all the areas in red are those where stunting in children is more than 40%, which is really high. So if you look at the reasons why children die, children under 5 years, you find that in 55% of the causes are associated with undernutrition or malnutrition. They may be dying of an infection, or they may be dying of some other reason, but of repeated malaria or diarrhea, but underlying cause is undernutrition. I was talking about the feeding practices. If you look at the 2005 to 2012, we find that the breastfeeding, early initiation has gone from 20% to 36%. So still it's quite low. Exclusive breastfeeding has also shown an increase, and complementary feeding in the first 6 months has come down. So most of the time when we see, as long as the babies are being breastfed up to 6 months of age, they don't show malnutrition. They may be born small, but after 6 months is when the curve actually starts moving up and the rate of underweight and stunting starts going up, because proper nutrition, which should be given at this age, breastfeeding is no longer enough. The child needs a good amount of calories and protein through complementary feeding, Most of our people don't devote enough time to do this. They don't have the knowledge, or they don't have the right skills to prepare that food. And therefore, you find 6 months to 2 years is the time when most children become undernourished. Now, how about the other side, the overnutrition and obesity? That's also very interesting, because again, from the NNMB data, we can see this is chronic energy deficiency. This is normal. So this means that your body mass index, BMI, is less than 18.5. This is 18.5 to 23. This is over 23. So over 23 is classified as overweight or obese. And this is in women. Again, this is tribal, this is rural, this is urban. Clear difference. Tribal women are the most undernourished, followed by the rural, followed by the urban. If you look at overweight and obesity, it's the opposite. 40% of urban women are now heading for overweight and obesity, but only 3% of tribal women. But I can tell you that this will change very soon, given the kind of change they have had to undergo in their diet and in their daily livelihood. They have also got now lack of exercise. They don't go into the forest anymore. Most of them are not farming either, because they don't have land to their name. So they are just dependent on the food that's available through PDS. Again, the same trend in tribal men, in men. This is tribal, rural, urban men. Obesity, tribal, rural, urban. So we see the same pattern here. And this is over a period of time. You can see from 1975 the first survey, 2012, we see the overweight is increasing over a period of time, and the underweight is coming down. This is the latest round of National Family Health Survey. Again, there's a lot of difference between the states. The same states which had poor indicators of nutrition also have low rates of overweight. So Meghalaya, Madhya Pradesh, Bihar, Bengal, Tripura, Uttarakhand. Here we see Andaman, Puducherry, Sikkim, Andhra, Tamil Nadu. 30 to 40% rates of overweight. And this is among children, various studies, again ranging from 2000 to 2012. So even among children now, overweight is increasing, obesity is increasing. Particularly you can see it in all our metros and urban areas. Why is it important? Because the body mass index in childhood is related to obesity in adults. This was a study called the Bogalusa Heart Study, where they looked at 2,600 subjects from 2 to 17 years of age and followed them up. And these children who had a high BMI when they were children, 77% turned out to have obesity as adults, whereas those children who were normal weight, only 7% became obese. So obesity is something that starts in childhood, and therefore it has to be stopped in childhood. Why do we have to stop it? Because obesity is associated with all these chronic diseases like diabetes, stroke, heart disease, osteoarthritis, sleep apnea, and also some cancers. Very interestingly, breast and colon cancer have a direct link with overweight and obesity. And we see in India now, breast cancer rates are increasing in women, whereas cervix cancer is coming down, because cervix cancer related to poor hygiene and sanitation, whereas breast cancer, the reason is not clear, but it is linked to overweight. Similarly, if you look at relationship between BMI and cardiovascular mortality, once you cross this and get into an overweight and then further into obesity, your risk of mortality due to heart attacks and other kinds of cardiovascular disease goes up tremendously, both in men and in women. So I think on both sides, we have to be very careful. If you're extremely malnourished, you have a high risk of death due to many reasons. And if you're overweight and obese, again, this risk increases. Hypertension is also increasing in our country. It's also linked to our change in lifestyle. And it's again very worrying that if you look at men and women, about 14% in Madhya Pradesh, 30% in Kerala and West Bengal, men had high blood pressure. The pooled average was 25% in men and 23% in women. And the problem with high blood pressure is that most of the time it doesn't have any symptoms till it leads to some complications. So the first time may land up with a stroke or land up with a kidney problem, and then realize that that person had hypertension. So unless you're checking your blood pressure regularly, you will never know. So even though a third of Indians have high blood pressure, this is a silent killer. And again, this is the latest data coming out from the NFHS in men and women by state. Same thing on this side of Bihar, Meghalaya, Madhya Pradesh, West Bengal, 10 to 12% of men and women have high blood pressure. But look at the rates in Andaman, Sikkim, Telangana, even and Haryana, Uttarakhand, Tamil Nadu are all in the middle. Now, what is interesting between the South Asian and the European metabolic profile is that the waist-hip ratio is a good marker of abdominal obesity or fat. The same waist-hip ratio in a European and in a South Asian, like an Indian or a Bangladeshi or a Pakistani, look at the diabetes prevalence difference. So this again is not being fully understood as to why there is a South Asian susceptibility, but there's a direct correlation between central obesity and development of insulin resistance and diabetes. So it's a very good marker. Waist-hip ratio, I've often heard many cardiologists and diabetologists say just monitor your waist circumference and you can find out whether you are on this side or that side. So if you look at this waist circumference more than 100, 102, again you look at states like Kerala and Tamil Nadu here and Uttarakhand here, and a pooled one is 13.6% of men and about 23% of women actually have a waist circumference which is more than it should be. Similarly, for the waist-hip ratio also, it's a very large proportion. Diabetes following the same trend. Now we are doing a very large study called the INDIAB study. This data is a little old in fact, but it's almost the same. If you look at rates of diabetes, anywhere from 10 to 15% of the adult population has diabetes, and another 10 to 15% has pre-diabetes. Pre-diabetes over a period of time will become diabetes unless you do some drastic changes in the lifestyle. So it's actually quite important to also screen for blood sugar, and if you have pre-diabetes, there is a window of opportunity to prevent it from progressing to diabetes. But again, these rates have increased over a period of last 20-30 years. This is a study done by Dr. Mohan in Chennai, and in the year 2000, 98 to 2000, he looked at two urban populations. He looked at a middle income and a low income population, and he found that there was a difference in the rate of diabetes. He found 12% in the middle income, 6% in the low income. But he went back after 10 years, and then what did he find? He found that the prevalence had increased, but it had increased much more in the low income group by 135%. So now the low income group and the middle income group both had 15% of diabetes, and this was after a gap of about 9 to 10 years. That means all the risk factors now, in fact this group, low income group, probably has more risk factors. They have a more unhealthy diet. They cannot afford nutritious food, green leafy vegetables and fruits and all that. So they end up eating more of carbohydrate. This is some data on anemia. Again, we see that only 30% of our population has a normal hemoglobin. That means 2/3 of people have anemia. And if you look at anemia in children and women by state, even Kerala and the good states, Tamil Nadu, even there, about 40 to 50% of women and children have anemia. If you come to this side, West Bengal, Sikkim and Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, 70 to 80% of women and children have anemia. Again, it has many factors. Of course, very important is the low intake of dietary iron, particularly in our kind of diet, vegetarian diet, we have a low dietary iron intake. And the way that we combine our food, if you take iron containing foods along with wheat which has phytate, then it binds to the iron and it will not be absorbed. Whereas if you take iron with high vitamin C containing foods, it's much better absorbed. So there are a lot of factors which promote or inhibit the absorption of iron. So even if you're taking enough, it may not be absorbed. Similarly, you may be having hemorrhagic conditions. Then infections and infestations are very important. Repeated malaria. In most parts of central India, especially in the tribal areas, we still have chronic high prevalence of malaria. There it contributes. And at intestinal worms like hookworm infection and other worms also can keep on bleeding from the gut, and therefore they lose a lot of iron. Then, of course, the physiological condition like pregnancies, menarche, all these things lead to iron deficiency. What about vitamin A deficiency? Vitamin A deficiency leads to a condition called night blindness. And nowadays, of course, one does not see this night blindness. When I was doing my training, we still used to see a lot of it. But the Bitot spots is something that is visible in the eye. You can diagnose vitamin A deficiency. We still see that in many parts, the Bitot spots is there in about 1 to 1.5% of children. And if you look at blood vitamin A levels, then we see that the 60% of 1 to 5-year-old children have a low vitamin A level and a very low intake of vitamin A in the diet. Now this is important because we have this program, of course, where massive vitamin dose is given, either for 1 or 2 doses are given every 6 months starting from the age of 1 year. But there's a lot of opposition to this program. It's a costly program. The health workers have to go and reach all the children in the community. But if we can improve the intake of vitamin A in the diet, then we can stop this type of supplementation program. This is the prevalence of iodine deficiency. Of course, this is coming down with the use of iodized salt, but even now in some states you still have iodine deficiency. And in some of the parts you can see still goiter, which is a swelling of the thyroid which occurs due to iodine deficiency, still there in about 20%. Vitamin D deficiency, again a paradox, because we think that we're all exposed to sunlight, we're living in a tropical country, that we would have enough vitamin D. But when you look at the prevalence of deficiency, it's 70%, 90%, 45%, J&K 50 to 80%. Most of us, if you go and check your vitamin D levels, come out to be vitamin D deficient. This contributes to bone health, presence of osteoporosis, particularly in women after menopause, and it also contributes to fractures and so on. So it leads to rickets, osteoporosis, muscle weakness, and it's also vitamin D deficiency is now being linked to a number of other conditions, including cardiovascular diseases, infections, and autoimmune diseases. There's a lot of research going on in this area. This is a congenital deformity called meningomyelocele, which is linked to vitamin B12 and folic acid deficiency. Again, B12, these are all water-soluble B vitamins, high percentage of deficiency, and Dr. Yajnik from Pune has shown that if the mother is vitamin B12 deficient, it actually has an epigenetic effect on the fetus. There's a programming of the fetus for insulin resistance. So that baby who's born to a vitamin B12 deficient mother would be at much higher risk of developing metabolic syndromes and diabetes later in life. So this is something we have not paid much attention to. How do we detect and control vitamin B12 deficiencies? And you can see that the darker the color, the higher the rates of vitamin B12 deficiency. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, there's an intergenerational cycle of undernutrition. A child who has growth failure also has impaired mental and cognitive development. So it's not only that they are physically small or thin, but the brain growth is suboptimal, and that will affect ultimately their intellectual capacity, their earning capacity. It will affect their entire life. This then leads to adolescents who are low weight and height, and to a small adult woman with lower productivity. This in turn, a small woman who gets pregnant leads to a low birth weight baby, and so on. So that is why it's called as an intergenerational effect. Somewhere the cycle has to be broken. This is Dr. David Barker, who came with the theory of the fetal and infant origins of adult disease. So the worst thing is for a baby to be born very, very small, and then to be overfed and become an obese adult. And that is the kind of situation where you end up with a lot of diabetes and other metabolic problems. So we won't go into the detail, but essentially they develop insulin resistance, which leads to lipid disorders, diabetes, as well as hypertension. So just I want to also show the association between nutrition and infectious diseases, because I worked on tuberculosis. And we've started saying now that the best vaccine against TB is a good nutrition status, because there is no good vaccine for TB. All of us, we get the BCG when we are born, but the BCG only protects for the first few years of life, doesn't protect you from TB in adulthood. undernutrition is the single greatest risk factor for TB in India, just like HIV is the single biggest risk factor in sub-Saharan Africa. And many data from many parts of the world have shown there's a direct relationship between a low body mass index and the incidence of TB. In India, when you look at the data, you find TB is 4 times more common in the lowest socioeconomic group than the highest. And 55% of TB cases in India, we have about 2 to 3 million TB cases every year, even now, are attributable to undernutrition. This is higher in rural areas, higher among scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. The same association is true in the case of diseases like leprosy and HIV, where the incidence may not be directly linked to undernutrition, but the outcome, the progression, and whether they get cured or not depends a lot on how well nourished they are. So we need to really think of intervention strategies. Of course, monitoring, data collection, surveillance is very important. What the National Nutrition Monitoring Bureau had been doing, we are going to try and continue that system so that we continue to have data on nutrition. But we also need to analyze and take action on the findings. It's not just enough to monitor and to detect, but to take action. We have this ICDS program going on for many years now. We need to really use this data, all the data that's collected and comes to the center. But the ICDS worker never gets any feedback on the children who are under her care. And so we're thinking of digitizing this and having the data available on a real-time basis so that feedback can be given to her. This is now we are in the era of the Sustainable Development Goals. We have to achieve these by 2030. We have about 15 years. And the first goal is no poverty. The second goal is zero hunger. And the third goal is related to health. Now, of course, each of these goals will have actionable points under them, targets and indicators for each. So there are 169 targets. This is much more than what the Millennium Development Goals had. We had 8 goals, 17 targets. Now we have 17 goals and 169 targets. So 5 pillars of the Zero Hunger Challenge, according to Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, is 100% access to adequate food, so that's household food security, zero stunted children less than 2 years of age, and as a reality check, we're still at 30 to 40% stunted children, sustainable food systems, 100% increase in smallholder productivity and income, and zero loss or waste of food. So agriculture and nutrition are very much linked, and I think we have to link them even closer. We have to improve the intake of the communities in naturally occurring biofortified plants, whether it is moringa, drumstick, whether it's sweet potato, millets, and somehow we have to increase the intake of green leafy vegetables and fruits. And then, of course, all of you, I don't have to tell you that you're working on these biofortified varieties, whether it's zinc-rich rice or whether it's a iron-rich pearl millet or fortified varieties of maize or other cereals. These can play a very important role in correcting micronutrient deficiencies. The problem is that one micronutrient it's not sufficient to correct just the iron or just the zinc. Only a balanced diet can give all the micronutrients that a person needs. And then of course, we have the genetically biofortified plants, but again, it's the same issue. You're dealing with only one micronutrient at a time. So the community has an important role to play, and the community needs to understand what is the cause for poor nutrition. Why is the child not growing? What exactly should the child be fed? How much? How often? So there's a need for a big nutrition literacy program in our country. I wonder if our agricultural extension workers can play a role in also improving nutrition literacy, because at the moment there's nobody out there in the community who's giving advice on nutrition. Then, of course, introduce agricultural remedies to nutritional maladies based on gender and age, and introduce in the farming system many of these biofortified crops and varieties. And we have so much of millet diversity in our country. We need to not only conserve and preserve, but also expand the area under production and expand the availability of these millets through the PDS, so that people can actually take. Only 1 or 2 states in our country are offering millets through the PDS. So we have to pay attention to calorie deprivation. More or less now, people are getting enough calories because of the availability of the PDS. Protein deficiency, major problem now because of the increase in the cost of dals and pulses and legumes. And most important is what is called the hidden hunger, which is a micronutrient deficiency, for which you need a very balanced diet containing a lot of other elements like green leafy vegetables, fruits. If a person is non-vegetarian, well and good, but if a person is vegetarian, then they really need to take a whole variety of foods in order to get all the micronutrients. Of course, one can also fortify. Government is thinking now of fortifying wheat flour, rice, oil and milk with different vitamins. I mean, this is something which is on the cards, but that again will only take care of one or two nutrients. So it's very good that the ICAR and ICMR have been working together for many years, and every 6 months or so we try to meet, and we've identified 3 areas where we have a common interest and common goals. The first is the area of zoonotic diseases, because recently, of course, in the last few days, all of you would have read about the Zika virus, which is the latest threat. Now, we don't know where it came from, but quite possibly it was a zoonotic disease as well. All the emerging infections we've seen in the last few years, whether it's avian influenza, whether it's Ebola, or even HIV/AIDS, all came from animals to humans. And 70 or more than 70% of infections which are going to arise now in the future are going to come from animals. So I think we have to have a One Health approach and a very collaborative and open sharing of data between the animal and the human health, both in terms of surveillance, in terms of sharing specimens. We had a good example a few years ago where the ICMR approached the ICAR to do a survey in domestic goats and sheep and cattle to look for the prevalence of a virus which causes a hemorrhagic fever. It's called the Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever. A few years ago, a few people died in Gujarat. And we found that it's present in domestic animals to the extent of about 6 to 10% of animals had antibodies to this virus, which means that they are carrying the virus, but they don't get sick. But when it jumps to a human being, at any time these viruses mutate and then they become deadly pathogens. So I think we need to have a good surveillance system in our country. What are these viruses or other pathogens circulating, whether it's a domestic animals, whether it's wild animals, or whether it is migratory birds and so on, and how can it impact human beings? So the whole area of health security needs to be given more attention, and it can only be done if ICAR and ICMR work together collaboratively. There are viruses in the Bhopal lab, for example, which our virology institute needs, so we are in touch with them, because then we can develop diagnostics to apply in the human beings. Second area is pesticides in health, looking at long-term impact of pesticides on different aspects of human health. We have a very large program now, collaborative one. And the third area is in nutrition. How can we use agricultural solutions to address malnutrition in the community, whether it is encouraging people to grow biofortified plants, encouraging them to take whatever there is available in their backyard, and can we use agricultural extension workers for this program? It needs to be a long-term, cost-effective and a sustainable solution, and none of these intervention programs, like we have the supplementation or a vitamin D supplementation A program, or whether it's other iron and folic acid program, has been going on in our country for many years, but it has not had the impact on anemia in women and children what we expected. So those types of targeted programs where you're giving one vitamin or one micronutrient may not have the impact. We need to change both in terms of preventing undernutrition and anemia in our country, but also, as I showed you, the growing rates of obesity, diabetes and hypertension. All those can only be addressed by paying attention to what we eat and our lifestyle, which includes exercise and avoidance of other risk factors. Once again, I'd like to thank you all very much for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. May I now request the chairman of today's program to kindly give the remarks.
I'm sure you will all agree that it had been a brilliant lecture on a very important subject which is of great relevance, not only to the medical scientists but to also agriculture scientists. I am a common person. When the first lecture here was delivered by Vikram Sarabhai, I think Professor Chopra and Anupam were also there. It was how green is our green revolution. And today, if I try to go back, I would say how nutritionally secure is our food security. I think that is the message which we got. Having attained food security and having been a witness to the 50th year of independence, where Anil Saab, you were also present in the Central Hall of Parliament, when R.K. Narayan said that if we had achieved something over the last 50 years since independence through science, first is food security, and thanks to agricultural scientists. And second was, what he said was that to the health science, where our average age of the nation has doubled from 32 to 64 years at that time. In fact, it had held, I had been feeling so proud that day that at least something has been achieved and done. But when you look back, in the first lecture, Dr. Swaminathan was present, and he reminded about Paddock brothers' prediction relating to India, relating to our problem of hunger. And at that time, we were all concerned to do something to accomplish household food security, and I am glad that today nation has come a long way. We have left behind the Bengal famines. No one talks of those famines now. I was born during the year of Bengal famine, which my mother used to always tell while introducing my date of birth. And now we don't see those famines. So, young generation, you are lucky that you are born in a different age where we have food security, we have 50 million tons of food in our buffer stocks. We were importing 10 million tons, we are now exporting 20 million tons of food grains. We have turned the table. But when you look at the nutritional aspect, I think today if we need another green revolution, it has to be for household nutrition security. And that's the message which we have got very clearly from Soumya, and we thank you, Soumya, for having covered very important and vast topic where we see how much convergence is necessary between the health scientists and also the agriculture scientists. I must also at this stage remind you that when you look at the global hunger index scenario, our situation is not very happy. In 2013, we were at 63rd place out of 120 countries. And we did something better, that in 2015 we became 55th. But still, we are much, much below. In terms of whatever figures you saw, India is not figuring anywhere in terms of those achievements globally. And we also see that our National Family Health Survey 3 has clearly indicated that about 30% of our population is malnourished. Can we be really happy? And we need therefore household nutrition security. And household nutrition security mainly for the protein requirement and also for micronutrient requirements, which also got very clearly reflected. And India has a majority of population which is vegetarian. And recently we had a national debate on how to increase pulse production, and under National Food Security Mission, emphasis is being laid to increase production of pulses. We found out that still we have a long way to go. We are importing pulses to the extent of 10,000 crores annually, and it is to an extent of 3 to 4 million tons of deficiency that we have. So we need to, and who else will produce it for us? India is the largest producer of legumes. So do you think that others will produce and give to us, and will give at the cost which we can afford? These are really the questions which possibly we'll have to address, and it is the right time. You can't think of 42% children who are underweight, and that's where our conference on global conference on women in agriculture, Soumya, where Minaji and Dr. Swaminathan had actively participated, and President of India had inaugurated, and we had it here in India with about 700 delegates and 170 delegates from 40 countries. The message came very clearly that if you want nutrition security at household level, you have to empower women. And education of women is the most important and critical issue for health concern. And what you said, what figures you gave, Kerala, Himachal Pradesh, Arunachal Pradesh, Meghalaya, they are all where you have highest literacy for women. And that is where we always, no leader talks about reducing population growth rate. In fact, still our population growth rate is 1.5% annually, which is adding one Australia every year. So whatever we do gets nullified. Whatever progress we make on one side, it gets nullified, and then it was clear message in the global conference that you must empower women and engender them in agriculture, by which you can increase also crop productivity by 15 to 25%. This is the FAO data, World Bank data, and you can also ensure household nutrition security. So we need to look into the answers now, and not only continue arguing that this is a problem. We also see that that National Food Security Act in 2013 came and was adopted, but 8 states still don't follow it. Also, we have to see whether 2/3 of our population need that support, which is under that act. But that is beside the issue. We will have to provide people and the access to food. Having produced food, having had it in your buffer stock is not the solution. You have to ensure economic access to this food. And for economic access, we will have to address the concern of poverty, hunger, health and nutrition, which is the goal 2 of the Sustainable Development Goal 17, which you indicated. And actually, globally there is concern, also concern by many medical scientists, that why health and nutrition has not been taken up on its own and linked to one particular Sustainable Development Goal. Probably leaders might have thought that you can't address nutrition alone unless you have food. So food and nutrition go together, and we will have to see that we have right solutions for that, and there are right solutions. In fact, if we talk of protein requirement in our country, no doubt now food habit is changing, food basket for young population is changing, people are becoming non-vegetarian, especially young generation. But having said that, raising 3 to 4 million tons of pulses is not a problem. We had it under the National Food Security Mission. I say that this Food Security Mission should have separate mission on pulses. Why linked to other food? Why with wheat, rice and other cereals, the pulses, then you don't get that priority. But if it is a priority for the nation, so we need to now catalyze the policy makers. The policy makers need to understand this problem as a national problem. And in 2011, 2012, though I had given my report on pulse production, increase in pulse production at the request of Parliament Committee on Agriculture in 2000, it didn't attract attention, only it attracted attention when pulse productivity had to be increased and prices went to 150 to 200 kg, rupees per kg. And 2001, 2012, they took action on those recommendations. And in 1 year, we could not only increase area by 3 million hectare, but also increase productivity by, or rather production, total production by almost 3 million tons, and reduce the import substantially. So it's not that we can't do it, but you need, say, missionary approach. And what you require is to educate women particularly, to see that first 1,000 days for any growth, good growth of any newborn child is very, very important. And that 1,000 days is so critical, which we cannot afford to miss. The International Conference on Nutrition too had very clearly said that what we need is coordination of all sectors of our society to address this concern of nutrition, which means agriculture, health, education, because education is again related to population control to a great extent, and good health, and then water and social protection. So all these sectors are to work together, and our major concern, and I congratulate you, Soumya ji, that you said there is a coordination committee. Yes, we should have coordination committee between ICR and ICMR, and we used to have these committees before, ICMR, DRDO, CSIR, and so on, and address this jointly, so that it is not an issue of your baby or my baby. We have to own this baby who looks towards our support. It has also been indicated that cost to a nation in terms of annual GDP through not addressing malnutrition is to the extent of 10 to 13%. Imagine what. And Shenzhen Fan, while giving his lecture on Task Foundation Day here in this auditorium, had given very clearly these figures and indicated, and they have recently from IFPRI come out with Global Nutrition Report. I hope many of you 2015 have read it. It's very interesting report, and it tells very clearly that benefit cost ratio to any nation by addressing the nutritional problem is 16:1. It's quite significant, and compound rate of return is to the level of 10%. Won't take more of your time, but would like to say that among many problems that world faces today, malnutrition should not be one of them. This is what we should pledge. Malnutrition should go and be eradicated, not only reduced. And I am sure our soul of Lal Bahadur Shastri ji today would feel happy that we are addressing this concern. Having attained food security is not only enough. We have to provide balanced nutritious food. So household food and nutrition security as well as environmental security is the major challenge that we have to face. We have to make our agriculture more sustainable. We have to make use of those foods which we are not now consuming, and globally we are dependent only on 12 crops for our food requirements, whereas there are more than 2,500 different species which could be of great value nutritionally to the human being. But we have neither studied nor, so we talk The orphan crops, sometimes we talk crops for the future and what not, but we are not addressing them comprehensively. So at this stage, we need that, we see that ending this challenge of malnutrition is a chance for us, and we should not miss this chance. So I would like to say that how brilliant this lecture was, and at the end would request you to give a big hand to our speaker.
Thank you, sir. I now request Dr. T. Mahapatra, Director IARI, to felicitate the chairman with a shawl and memento as a mark of respect, our affection and acknowledgement. I once again request Dr. Mahapatra ji to kindly do the honor of presenting a shawl. I request Dr. R.S. Paroda ji to kindly present a shawl and memento to the eminent speaker of today's program as a mark of respect, affection, acknowledgement and appreciation. Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, before we conclude the program, I invite Dr. R.K. Jain, Dean and Joint Director Education, to formally present a vote of thanks.
Respected Dr. R.S. Paroda, Chairman of today's function, respected Madam Soumya Swaminathan, Speaker of the 46th LAL BAHADUR SHASTRI Memorial Lecture, respected members of the family of late Shri LAL BAHADUR Shastri ji, Dr. Mahapatra, Director and Vice Chancellor of this deemed university, distinguished dignitaries and invited guests. It's my pleasure and honor to propose a formal vote of thanks at the end of the successful conclusion of the most prestigious 46th LAL Bahadur Shastri Memorial Lecture. Besides the father of the nation, Shri Mahatma Gandhi ji, Shastri ji is another human being who symbolizes the dreams and the desires, ambitions and the aspirations of the most ordinary man. I pay my own humble tribute and respect to the memory of this great son of India. On behalf of the director, the faculty, the staff and the students, and on my own personal behalf, I would like to sincerely thank Dr. R.S. Paroda for kindly accepting our invitation to chair this most prestigious lecture. We feel honored and inspired with your presence for chairing this event, and that shows your concern for this institute actually. I also wish to convey our sincere gratitude and thanks to Madam Soumya Swaminathan for accepting our invitation to deliver the 46th LAL Bahadur Shastri Memorial Lecture and joining us in paying our humble tribute to the memory of late Shri Shastri ji. Madam, your lecture will not only remain in our memory but also continue to guide us in shaping our program to ensure nutritional security. And the take-home message of your presentation, that is One Health approach, would be addressed in true spirit by this institution actually. The respected members of Lal Bahadur Shastri families deserve a very special and sincere thanks for their kind presence actually. We as scientists owe a lot of
dedication to the cause of excellence in agricultural research and education to the Shastriji's family. On behalf of the Institute, I would like to record our sincere thanks to them again. To Dr. Mahapatra, I owe my special thanks in having confidence in me and providing administrative and logistic support. Otherwise, it would not have been possible to organize this program. I record my sincere thanks and appreciation to all our invited guests for responding to our invitation and for their gracious presence with us. I express my sincere thanks to the director of all the ICR sister institutes, joint directors, project directors, heads of divisions, professors, and my distinguished faculty and the students of IARI for attending this Lal Bahadur Shastri Memorial Lecture. I extend thanks to the representatives of the press and the media for responding to our invitation and for covering this prestigious lecture. Grateful acknowledgement is also recorded here for the services given by several of my colleagues in the faculty, staff of the postgraduate school, students, volunteers, and technical and administrative and supporting staff from the directorate, different divisions, and this auditorium for their valuable and dedicated contribution behind the scene for successful organization of this function. I thank you all once again.
I request you all to join us for tea in the lawns.
அதில் இருக்கும்